Welcome to Story Tales. Please like this video and subscribe to Story Tales. I hope you enjoy the story. Let's begin. The Valor Gaming Enterprises celebration was in full swing. Champagne flowed freely across the glossy black tables that dotted the rooftop venue of their flagship Las Vegas casino resort. Servers in crisp uniforms navigated between clusters of executives and developers, their trays balanced with practiced precision. Light from a surrounding strip painted the night sky in electric shades of blue, red, and gold. Frank Vance stood at the edge of the crowd, nursing a glass of whiskey. At 35, he carried himself with quiet confidence. His dark hair was neatly trimmed, suit impeccably fitted, nothing flashy, but quality in every thread. 8 years he'd given to this company. 8 years of 16-hour days, of canceled vacations, of building Valor's competitive gaming platforms from promising startups into billion-dollar juggernauts. He watched his wife, Betty, across the room. At 30, she was still turning heads in her form-fitting red dress. Her blonde hair cascaded in perfect waves down her back as she laughed at something Victor Langford, Valor's CEO, had just whispered in her ear. Her hand rested casually on his arm. Too casually. They're not even trying to hide it anymore, came a voice at Frank's side. Frank turned to see Jesse Rios, his best friend and head of cybersecurity. Jesse's dark eyes were narrowed, watching the same scene. At 34, Jesse had the kind of intensity that made junior employees nervous. His loyalty to Frank was absolute, forged in the early days when Valor was just a scrappy contender in the esports world. Why would they? Frank replied, his voice neutral. Victor owns the place. Still, it's your party, your promotion. Frank shrugged and took another sip. We'll see. Across the venue, Daphne Moore, Valor's COO, approached them. At 38, she carried herself with an authority that commanded respect. Her cropped gray suit and steel blue eyes made her look more like a military commander than an executive. Boys, she greeted them, champagne flute in hand. Quite the turnout. Victor spares no expense when celebrating himself. Jesse muttered. Daphne's lips curved slightly. You know how it goes. The king must have his court. She turned to Frank. Ready for your big moment? Before Frank could answer, Milo Zhang, one of Valor's star esports competitors turned developer, sidled up to their group. At 28, his casual stance and perpetually amused expression belied the ruthless strategic mind that had made him a gaming legend. Betting pool says the announcement comes in 10 minutes, Milo said. I've got 50 on them dragging it out for another hour. You're on, Jesse replied. Frank watched as Victor clinked a knife against his glass, the sharp sound cutting through the buzz of conversation. The room gradually quieted. Betty separated herself from Victor's side, but not before squeezing his arm one last time. She made her way through the crowd to stand beside Frank, slipping her arm through his. He felt her press against him, the familiar scent of her perfume now seeming cloying. What did I miss? She whispered, smiling up at him. Frank said nothing, just nodded toward Victor, who now stood on a small platform at the center of the room. Victor Langford embodied every stereotype of the tech CEO who'd gotten too big for his roots. At 50, his waistline had expanded along with his ego. His custom suit probably cost more than most employees made in a month. His silver hair was perfectly styled, his smile practiced and hollow. Ladies and gentlemen, Victor began, raising his glass. What year it's been for Valor Gaming. Record profits, 3 major titles launched, and our competitive circuit reaching over 50 million viewers worldwide. Applause rippled through the crowd. None of this would be possible without the talent assembled in this room tonight, Victor continued. The brilliant minds who code our games, the marketing wizards who sell them, and the visionaries who guide us forward. Frank felt Betty's arm tighten around his. He kept his face carefully neutral. Tonight, we celebrate true innovation and bold leadership, Victor announced, his gaze sweeping the room before settling somewhere over Frank's shoulder. And who better to lead us into the future than? He paused dramatically. Betty Vance, our new head of game development. The room erupted in applause. Frank felt as if the floor had dropped out from under him. The position should have been as had been practically promised to him after his last 3 titles had broken company records. Yet here was his wife of 5 years, who'd been with the company barely a month in PR, suddenly leapfrogging over him and everyone else that Betty's hand squeezed his arm once before she pulled away, a brilliant smile spreading across her face as she moved toward the platform. The crowd parted for her like water. Frank registered Jesse's muttered curse beside him, saw Daphne's eyebrow raise in disbelief, caught Milo's assessing glance. "Thank you, Victor," Betty gushed, taking her place beside the CEO. "This is such an unexpected honor. I promise to bring fresh perspective to the development team and build on the incredible foundation already in place." Victor placed his hand on the small of Betty's back, the gesture just a fraction too intimate. "Frank," he called out, his voice carrying a smug undertone. "She's done more for this company in 1 month than you have in 8 years." The room went quiet. All eyes turned to Frank. Jesse tense beside him, ready to jump to his defense. Daphne watched with calculating eyes. Frank felt a cold clarity settle over him. In that moment, everything clicked into place: the late nights Betty claimed to be working, the sudden interest in his projects, the text messages she guarded. He'd suspected, but now he knew. Instead of the outburst everyone expected, Frank smiled. He raised his glass, the movement deliberate and controlled. "To Betty," he said, his voice steady. "And to Monday." The confusion on Victor's face was slight but unmistakable. Betty's smile faltered for just a second before she recovered, raising her own glass in acknowledgement. As the party resumed, Frank turned to Jesse. "We need to talk. My office. Now." The executive offices of Valor Gaming occupied the top 3 floors of their corporate tower. Even at this late hour, the lights of Las Vegas painted golden rectangles across the polished floor as Frank led Jesse into his private office and locked the door behind them. "Tell me you're not going to just take this," Jesse said, pacing the room like a caged animal. Frank moved to his desk, his movements measured. He pressed his palm against a hidden scanner, and a secure drawer slid open. From it, he removed a flash drive. "I've suspected something was going on for weeks," Frank said. "Betty's been careless. Too confident. And Victor's always been careless. That's why I had you put together that security audit last month." Frank plugged the drive into his computer. Screens of data populated his monitor. "I needed access to the company's servers without raising flags." Jesse leaned over Frank's shoulder, eyes widening as he recognized what he was seeing. "You've been gathering evidence. Financial records, emails, hotel reservations." His voice trailed off as he processed the implications. "How long have you known?" "Known? Since tonight." "Suspected?" "Since Betty started working late with Victor 3 weeks ago." Frank navigated through folders of meticulously organized files. "I need your help taking this further." For the next hour, they dug deeper into Valor Gaming's systems, Jesse's expertise in cybersecurity providing access to records that would have otherwise remained hidden. What they uncovered painted a damning picture. Financial statements showing hundreds of thousands of dollars diverted to shell companies that ultimately funded lavish hotels, jewelry, and private jets, all used by Victor and Betty. Email exchanges dating back months before Betty even joined the company, planning her hiring and rapid promotion. Records of HR being forced to rewrite job qualifications to fit Betty's limited resume. And most shocking of all, documents revealing Victor's plan to sell Valor Gaming to a Chinese conglomerate without board approval, a deal that would make him billions while leaving most shareholders with devalued stock. "This is unbelievable," Jesse muttered, scrolling through the evidence. "They were planning this for months. Betty used you to get her foot in the door." Frank leaned back in his chair, a cold smile spreading across his face. "And now they think they've won." "We could expose them now," Jesse said, already typing commands to prepare the data. "I can have this in the board's inbox in 5 minutes. Frank placed a hand on Jesse's arm, stopping him. "Not yet. I want them both to suffer first." "What are you thinking? Victor's been embezzling from the company for years. The board has turned a blind eye because he delivers results. But this sale would hurt them personally, hit their pockets. That's what will turn them against him." Frank stood, walking to the window to look out at the glittering city below. As for Betty, I want her to taste victory before I take it all away. Frank, you're scaring me a little, Jesse said, though his expression showed more admiration than fear. Monday, Frank replied. Everything changes on Monday. When Frank arrived home, the penthouse was dark and silent. He found Betty in their bedroom, already removing her jewelry at the vanity. Their eyes met in the mirror. Some party, she said, her tone light as she unclasped her necklace. I was looking for you afterward. Were you? Frank remained in the doorway, watching her. I thought you'd be celebrating with Victor. Betty's hands paused for just a moment before she continued. Don't be like that, Frank. This promotion is good for both of us. Is it? He entered the room, moving to the bar cart in the corner to pour himself a drink. Tell me, how exactly did the head of PR become qualified to run game development overnight? Betty turned to face him, her expression carefully composed. Victor sees potential in me. I've been learning about the development side. Stop, Frank cut her off, his voice calm but firm. I know, Betty. I know everything. Her face remained neutral, but her eyes darted to the side, calculating. What are you talking about? I didn't know this was happening. Frank mimicked her earlier words. Watching her reaction, Betty stood, smoothing her dress. I didn't know Victor was going to announce it tonight. He told me he was still considering candidates. You knew. Frank's voice cut through her excuses like a blade. You planned it. The pretense fell away from Betty's face. Her lips curled into a smirk. Victor sees my real value, she said, her voice dripping with satisfaction. Something you never did. And what value is that? The company VP's already tried to explain to me what skills you bring to the table, but I'm still confused. I have vision, Betty shot back. I know how to position us for the future. You're stuck in the past, Frank. Still coding like it's your first job out of college. Victor understands ambition. Frank nodded slowly, taking a sip of his drink. And how long have you and Victor been planning this little coup? 6 months? Longer. Betty's eyes narrowed. What have you been doing? Your mistake was using the company email system, Frank said. Even for the accounts you thought were private. You hacked my emails. Betty's voice rose in indignation. That's illegal. No. Conducting company business on private servers to hide an affair and financial fraud is illegal. Frank set down his glass. The private jets to Cabo, the suite at the Bellagio, the little shopping sprees at Tiffany's, all on the company dime. The board won't be happy. Betty's confidence wavered. You don't have proof. I have everything, Frank replied. Every message, every receipt, every meeting where you and Victor planned how to push me aside. So what now? Betty crossed her arms. You go crying to the board? Tell them your wife outplayed you? That would end your career at Valor faster than anything Victor and I could do. Frank smiled, the expression not reaching his eyes. I'm not going to do anything. Yet. What does that mean? It means congratulations on your promotion, Betty. I hope you're ready for your first day. Monday morning arrived with the harsh brightness typical of the Nevada desert. Frank dressed meticulously charcoal suit, crisp white shirt, subtle blue tie. He arrived at Valor Gaming headquarters 30 minutes before Betty, giving him time to set certain plans in motion. The development team was already gathered in the main conference room when Frank entered. 20 pairs of eyes turned to him, many filled with sympathy, others with curiosity. Morning, everyone, Frank greeted them, his demeanor relaxed. I believe we have a team meeting scheduled to introduce our new department head. Ava Chun, one of the senior developers, approached him. Frank, this is bullshit. You should be running this department. We all know it. Frank smiled. That's why I called this pre-meeting. I want to be clear, Betty Vance is now your boss, and I expect you all to treat her with the respect her position deserves. Confused glances circulated around the room. But, Frank continued, respect must be earned. Betty has no background in game development, no coding experience, no management experience. She'll need your guidance to understand even the basics of what we do here. He paused, allowing his words to sink in. So by all means, when she asks questions, and she will ask many questions, explain everything. In detail, every line of code, every algorithm, every game mechanic. She's here to learn, after all. A slow smile spread across Ava's face as she understood. Complete transparency. Got it. Absolute transparency, Frank agreed. Now, I believe our new head of development will be arriving shortly. Let's make her first day memorable. When Betty swept into the conference room 15 minutes later, dressed in an expensive designer suit and radiating confidence, the entire development team was waiting. Frank stood at the back of the room, watching. "Good morning, everyone," Betty announced, moving to the head of the table. "I'm excited to begin this new chapter with all of you. I know I have big shoes to fill, but I'm confident that together we can take Valor Gaming to the next level." She glanced at Frank, a hint of challenge in her eyes. Frank has graciously agreed to stay on as a senior developer, and I'll be relying on his expertise as I transition into this role. Actually, Frank spoke up, "I think the team has some questions they'd like to ask you first." Betty's smile remained fixed. "Of course, I'm an open book." For the next hour, the development team proceeded to bombard Betty with increasingly technical questions about game engines, programming languages, server architecture, and competitive gameplay mechanics. With each question, her confident facade cracked a little more. "Could you explain your approach to balancing competitive gameplay when implementing a new character class?" Ava asked, her expression innocently curious. Betty faltered. "Well, I believe in taking a holistic approach, looking at the data. Specifically, which data metrics?" Another developer pressed, "Do you prefer using win rate distributions or time-to-kill ratios for initial balancing?" "Both are valuable," Betty attempted, her voice losing conviction. "And your thoughts on the current debate between deterministic versus stochastic netcode implementation for our new fighter title?" A third developer chimed in. By the end of the meeting, Betty's makeup couldn't hide the flush of humiliation on her face. As the team filed out, she caught Frank's arm. "What the hell was that?" she hissed. Frank raised his eyebrows. "That was your team getting to know their new boss. Isn't that what you wanted? You put them up to this." "I simply encouraged transparency." Frank checked his watch. "By the way, you have a meeting with the server team in 5 minutes. I'd brush up on distributed systems architecture if I were you." As Frank walked away, his phone vibrated with a text from Jesse. Phase 1 complete. Moving to Phase 2. Just as Betty's meeting with the server team began, disaster struck. Alerts blared across the tech department as Valor Gaming's main servers crashed simultaneously. Their flagship game, played by millions worldwide, went offline without warning. Within minutes, social media exploded with complaints. The customer service lines lit up. Revenue bled with every passing second. Frank watched from his office as Betty was pulled from her meeting into an emergency response session. Victor called in, his voice echoing through the conference room speakerphone. "What the hell is happening?" Victor demanded. "We're losing millions here." "We're looking into it," the head of IT responded. "Some kind of cascading failure across our authentication servers." "Betty," Victor barked, "get this fixed. Now, this is why I put you in charge." All eyes turned to Betty, who stood frozen, clearly out of her depth. We should restore from backup." The silence that followed was deafening. "I'll handle this," Frank finally said, stepping forward. Betty can observe the recovery process as a learning experience. For the next 3 hours, Frank methodically directed the team through the crisis, identifying the mysterious failure points and orchestrating a recovery. The servers gradually came back online, the crisis contained, but not before Valor had lost an estimated $2 million in revenue and untold amounts of player goodwill. Betty retreated to her new office, but her day was far from over. As she attempted to formulate a public response to the server crash, her assistant rushed in with a tablet. "Ms. Vance, you need to see this. It's trending everywhere." On the screen was a tweet Betty had posted 3 years earlier, before she'd ever considered a career at Valor Gaming. "Why do girl gamers always need special treatment? Either get good or get out. No one wants to hear your whining. Hashtag no simp zone." The tweet had somehow resurfaced and gone viral, with thousands of users sharing their outrage that Valor Gaming had appointed someone with such views to lead their development team. The hashtag Valor Hates Women was trending. Betty's face drained of color. "How did this? I deleted this years ago. It was screenshotted," her assistant explained. "Gaming journalists are requesting comments." Several female streamers have already announced they're boycotting Valor titles. Betty grabbed her phone, dialing Victor. It went straight to voicemail. She tried again with the same result. What she didn't know was that Victor was dealing with his own crisis. An anonymous whistleblower had leaked documents to the financial press suggesting the CEO had been embezzling company funds for personal use. While the documents were carefully curated to avoid any mention of Betty, they painted a damning picture of Victor's financial misconduct. By the end of the day, 3 major sponsors had pulled out of Valor Gaming's upcoming tournament, citing concerns about the company's leadership and values. The stock price had dropped 15%, and Betty Vance, not even 12 hours in her new role, found herself at the center of a perfect storm. As she finally left the office that night, she found Frank waiting by the elevator. "Tough first day?" he asked, his tone sympathetic but his eyes cold. Betty stared at him, realization dawning. "You did this. All of it." Frank stepped into the elevator and held the door. "Coming." Too exhausted to argue, Betty joined him. As the doors closed, Frank spoke again, his voice quiet. "You know what the difference is between us, Betty? I built things. Games, teams, systems. I created value." The elevator descended smoothly. "You and Victor? You just take things. And people who only take eventually run out of things to steal. Is that a threat?" Betty asked, her voice tight. Frank smiled as the elevator reached the lobby. "No, Betty. It's a forecast." As they walked through the lobby, executives and board members rushed past them toward the conference rooms, their expressions grim. "What's happening?" Betty asked a passing assistant. "Emergency board meeting," the young man replied. "Something about financial irregularities." Frank checked his watch. "Right on schedule. I'd hurry if I were you, Betty. I think your boyfriend might need your support." The emergency board meeting was scheduled for 9 p.m. in Valor Gaming's executive conference room. Frank arrived first, arranging documents in front of each seat with methodical precision. The room screamed corporate power, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Las Vegas Strip, a massive table of polished black stone, leather chairs for the 12 board members. Daphne Moore arrived next, her expression carefully neutral as she surveyed Frank's preparations. "Quite the day," she remarked, selecting a seat near the head of the table. "Server crashes, social media scandals, stock price in free fall. Mercury must be in retrograde," Frank replied dryly. Daphne's lips twitched. "And now, these financial documents mysteriously appearing in the business press. Strange coincidence." "Very strange." She studied him, her sharp eyes missing nothing. "Victor's done, isn't he?" Frank straightened a folder, his movements precise. "I'll make sure of it." "And what comes after?" Daphne asked. "Have you thought that far ahead?" Before Frank could answer, board members began filing in, their faces grave. The air buzzed with tense whispers as they took their seats. Betty slipped in, looking harried, and chose a chair near the back of the room. She avoided Frank's gaze. Victor Langford burst through the doors last, his face flushed with anger. His eyes locked on Frank immediately. "You," he snarled. "This is your doing." Frank raised his eyebrows. "I'm not sure what you mean, Victor. Who leaked those financial reports?" Victor slammed his fist on the table, causing several board members to flinch. Frank leaned back in his chair. "Who do you think?" The room fell silent, tension crackling in the air. Gerald Hughes, the board chairman, cleared his throat. "Let's bring this meeting to order. We're here to address some very serious allegations that have come to light today." "Allegations?" Victor scoffed. "Some disgruntled employee hacked our systems and doctor reports. This is corporate espionage, not a real scandal." Frank stood, walking to the front of the room. "With respect, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to present some information relevant to this discussion." "The floor is yours, Mr. Vance," Hughes replied. Frank activated the projector. Financial records appeared on the large screen, meticulously organized and highlighted. "What you're seeing are Valor Gaming's actual financial record for the past 18 months, Frank explained, his voice steady. "I've taken the liberty of highlighting certain expenditures that warrant closer examination." He clicked through to a detailed breakdown. Here we have $342,000 charged to market research that actually funded private jet trips to Cabo, San Lucas, Bali, and the Maldives. Another slide. Here's $175,000 for consultant fees that purchased jewelry from Tiffany's and Cartier. Victor's face darkened. You hacked confidential company records. As head of game development until this morning, I had full access to all company systems, Frank interrupted smoothly. No hacking required. The board members exchanged troubled glances. And this, Frank continued, bringing up a new slide showing hotel reservations, is a pattern of luxury hotel suites booked under the company account. You'll note these coincide with Betty Vance's travels before she was even officially employed by Valor. Betty stiffened in her chair. Hughes leaned forward. Are you suggesting Mr. Langford was using company funds for a personal relationship? I'm not suggesting anything, Frank replied. The evidence speaks for itself. Victor stood abruptly. This is a witch hunt. Yes, I use company resources as is my right as CEO. I built this company. These perks are standard in the industry. Embezzlement is not a standard perk. Daphne spoke up, her voice cool. Nor is hiring and promoting your mistress over qualified candidates. Betty gasped. That's not I earned my position. Frank brought up a final slide in email from Victor to HR, dated 2 months earlier. Rewrite the head of development requirements. Take out the technical qualifications and add communications background instead. I want Betty Vance in that role by summer, understood? You manipulated the hiring process, Frank said quietly. You stole from the company. And now you are planning to sell Valor Gaming without board approval. This last revelation sent a shock wave through the room. Hughes half rose from his chair. What sale? Frank distributed new documents. Victor has been in secret negotiations with Golden Dragon Entertainment to sell his controlling shares at a premium, while the rest of the stockholders would receive significantly devalued offerings. The deal would have been announced next month. Chaos erupted as board members paged through the evidence, voices rising in angry questions. Victor stood in the center of the storm, his face contorted with rage. Victor, Daphne spoke, her voice cutting through the clamor. You have one option. Resign, or I'll bury you. This is my company. Victor shouted. You can't force me out. Actually, Hughes interjected. With this evidence, we can, and we will. The board will be calling for a vote of no confidence, followed by potential criminal charges. Victor's gaze darted around the room, finding no allies. Even Betty had shrunk back, distancing herself from him. Frank calmly slid a document across the table, a resignation letter with Victor's name already printed at the bottom. Do the honors, Frank said, offering a pen. Victor glared at him with pure hatred. For a moment, it seemed he might lunge across the table. Instead, he snatched the pen and scrawled his signature, then threw it down. You'll regret this, he hissed at Frank. All of you will. Your company credentials have already been deactivated, Frank informed him. Security is waiting to escort you out. As if on cue, 2 security officers appeared at the door. Victor straightened his jacket, attempting to salvage his dignity. I don't need an escort. Company policy, Frank replied, the ghost of a smile playing on his lips. For former employees. As Victor was led away, the board erupted in discussion. Betty tried to slip out unnoticed, but Daphne intercepted her. Ms. Vance, we're not finished here. Betty Vance stood alone in the middle of the conference room, surrounded by the board of directors. The initial shock of Victor's ousting had given way to focused attention on her role in the scandal. Let me explain, Betty began, her voice wavering slightly. I had no knowledge of Victor's financial improprieties. Our relationship was purely professional. Frank, who had retaken his seat, raised an eyebrow but remained silent. The emails suggest otherwise, Hughes remarked, reviewing the evidence Frank had provided. And your rapid promotion from PR to head of game development raises serious questions. I have qualifications, Betty insisted. I was bringing fresh perspective to the department. Innovation, new ideas, such as, Daphne asked. Betty faltered. I was still developing my strategic vision. After today's server crash, which cost us millions, Hughes continued, and the social media controversy surrounding your past comments, the board has concerns about your ability to lead the development team. That tweet was taken out of context, Betty protested. And the server crash wasn't my fault. It was sabotage. She cut herself off, glancing at Frank. Frank maintained his neutral expression, though inwardly he noted her quick accusation. She was already looking for someone to blame. Daphne leaned forward. Ms. Vance, the fact remains that you were promoted under fraudulent circumstances by a CEO who was using company resources to conduct an inappropriate relationship with you. That's not. Betty. Daphne cut her off, her voice firm but not unkind. You're fired. The color drained from Betty's face. No, wait, I can fix this. Oh, I'm sure you'll try, Daphne replied, a cold smile playing on her lips. Security will escort you to clean out your office. Your credentials have already been disabled. Betty looked desperately around the room, seeking any ally. Finding none, her gaze settled on Frank. This is your doing, she said, her voice low and venomous. You orchestrated all of this. Frank met her gaze steadily. You made your choices, Betty. Now you get to live with them. As security led her away, Frank remained seated while the board discussed next steps. Hughes called the meeting to order again. We need interim leadership while we sort through this mess, he announced. Daphne, as COO, you'll temporarily assume CEO responsibilities. Daphne nodded. I accept. And for head of game development, I nominate Frank Vance to return to his position. Seconded. Another board member quickly added. All in favor? Hughes asked. A chorus of ayes filled the room. Motion carries. Frank, welcome back. Frank inclined his head in acknowledgement. Thank you. I'll need full authority to stabilize the development division after today's disruptions. Granted, Hughes confirmed. Do whatever is necessary to get us back on track. After the meeting concluded, Frank found Daphne waiting for him by the elevator. Quite the chess player, aren't you? She remarked. Taking down Victor and Betty in one day. Frank pressed the elevator button. I don't know what you mean. Please, Daphne scoffed. The server crash that conveniently happened during Betty's first meeting? That ancient tweet suddenly resurfacing? The perfectly timed leak of financial documents. She studied him with something like admiration. You could have exposed them both weeks ago. Instead, you waited and orchestrated their very public downfall. The elevator arrived, and they stepped inside. What happens next, Frank? Daphne asked. Are you satisfied with getting your old job back? Frank smiled slightly. This was never about the job, Daphne. No, she agreed. It was about retribution. Justice, Frank corrected her. And it's not complete yet. Later that night, Frank returned to the penthouse he had shared with Betty. He found the place in disarray, drawers pulled open, clothes scattered across the bed, jewelry box emptied. Betty had clearly come and grabbed what she could before fleeing. Frank moved through the space methodically, gathering Betty's abandoned belongings into boxes. As he worked, his phone rang his lawyer. It's done, the lawyer informed him. Divorce papers were served to Mrs. Vance this evening as she left Valor headquarters. Given the circumstances, we've requested expedited proceedings and a freezing of joint assets pending resolution. And the prenuptial agreement, rock solid. The infidelity clause is clear, she gets nothing. Good, Frank replied. Keep me updated. He ended the call and continued packing Betty's things, feeling nothing but cold satisfaction as he erased her presence from his home. 1 month passed. Frank had settled into his restored role as head of game development, systematically rebuilding the department's morale and productivity. The server infrastructure had been completely overhauled legitimately this time, and Valor Gaming stock had begun to recover. He sat in his office reviewing quarterly projections when Jesse knocked on his door. Got a minute? Jesse asked, stepping inside and closing the door behind him. Always for you, Frank replied, setting aside his tablet. What's up? Jesse dropped into the chair across from Frank's desk. I've been keeping tabs on our friends as requested. He pulled out his phone, scrolling through notes. Victor's been blacklisted from every major gaming company. 2 hedge funds he approached for backing a new venture backed out after anonymous tips about his history. Frank nodded, satisfaction evident in his expression. And Betty, That's actually why I'm here, Jesse said, leaning forward. She's been trying to contact you. Multiple calls to your personal number, emails to your private account. I've blocked her on everything, Frank replied. Well, she's getting desperate. Lost the condo when the bank accounts were frozen. That fancy sports car got repossessed last week. She's been staying at some budget motel off the strip. Frank raised an eyebrow. Has she found work? Jesse's mouth curved in a grim smile. That's the best part. 3 interviews at gaming companies, all mysteriously canceled at the last minute. She finally landed a customer service job at Game Realm, that Valor knockoff company with the terrible mobile games. Customer service. Frank couldn't hide his satisfaction. Handling angry player complaints. Minimum wage, graveyard shift, Jesse confirmed. She used to fly private jets on a company dime. Now she's eating ramen and getting yelled at by 12-year-olds about in-game purchases. Frank leaned back in his chair, a cold smile playing on his lips. Perfect. There's more, Jesse continued. The board meeting is set for tomorrow. Daphne has officially recommended you for the CEO position. It's all but guaranteed. Frank nodded slowly. Any opposition? None. You're the hero who saved the company from Victor's corruption. Your games are breaking records. The development team worships you, and the stock price has recovered. The board is practically tripping over themselves to offer you the job. Good. Frank stood, moving to the window that overlooked the Las Vegas skyline. Have security briefed about Betty. I don't want her anywhere near the building tomorrow. Already done, Jesse assured him. What if she keeps trying to contact you? She'll give up eventually, Frank replied. When she realizes there's nothing left for her here. Later that evening, as Frank worked late in his office, his private line rang an unlisted number that only a handful of people possessed. He considered ignoring it, but curiosity won out. Frank Vance, he answered. Frank. Betty's voice, once confident and seductive, now sounded small and broken. Please don't hang up. Frank remained silent, waiting. I know you're there, she continued. I need to talk to you. Just 5 minutes. What could you possibly have to say that I would want to hear? Frank finally responded, his voice devoid of emotion. I made a mistake, Betty said, desperation creeping into her tone. A terrible mistake. I was greedy and stupid and you got caught, Frank finished for her. That's what you're really sorry about. No, it's more than that. I've lost everything, Frank. My job, my home, my reputation. I'm working customer service for $12 an hour. Do you know what that's like? Having angry gamers screaming at you all night. No, Frank replied coolly, but you're learning valuable skills. Empathy, humility, things you've always lacked. Frank, please, Betty's voice cracked. I need help, just a loan until I can get back on my feet. Or a reference for a better job. Anything. Frank closed his eyes, remembering everything: the betrayal, the humiliation, the cold calculation with which Betty had planned to discard him after using his reputation to advance her own career. You did this to yourself, Betty, he said finally. You made a choice when you decided to sleep with Victor, when you plotted against me, when you took that promotion knowing you weren't qualified. Frank, please, you're paying for it, Frank continued, his voice hardening. And you'll continue paying for it. That's how consequences work. A sob came through the line. What do you want from me? An apology? Fine, I'm sorry. I made a horrible mistake. What else do you want? I don't want anything from you, Frank answered simply. That's the point, Betty. You have nothing I want or need. Not anymore. He hung up, cutting off her desperate pleas. For a moment, he sat motionless, staring at the Las Vegas lights. Then he turned back to his work, putting the conversation and Betty firmly out of his mind. The next day, the board meeting proceeded exactly as Jesse had predicted. In a unanimous vote, Frank Vance was appointed CEO of Valor Gaming Enterprises. As he accepted congratulations from board members and executives, he caught Daphne watching him with a knowing expression. Congratulations, CEO Vance, she said when the room had emptied. A remarkable rise from the ashes. Thank you, Daphne, Frank replied. I hope you'll stay on as COO. The company needs your expertise. Of course, she agreed. Though I wonder if you planned this all along Victor's downfall, clearing the path for your ascension. Frank's expression revealed nothing. I'm just a game developer who saw an opportunity. A chess master who saw 20 moves ahead, Daphne countered. You've destroyed your enemies and claimed the throne. Very impressive. Not destruction, Frank corrected her. Justice. Victor stole from the company. Betty betrayed her vows. They earned their fates. Daphne studied him. And have you found what you were looking for? Now that you've won, Frank considered the question. I protected what I built. That's enough. As Frank left the boardroom to address the company as its new CEO, his phone buzzed with a text from Jessie. Betty just got fired from Game Realm. Apparently, she snapped at a customer. She's got nothing left. Frank read the message, then deleted it without responding. He straightened his tie, put on his most confident smile, and pushed through the doors to address his employees. The game was over. And he had won. 6 months later, Frank sat in his penthouse office atop the Valor Gaming headquarters. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of Las Vegas, the city lights creating a galaxy of electric stars against the night sky. Since taking over as CEO, he had moved the company in bold new directions, acquiring 2 smaller game studios, launching a revolutionary VR platform, and doubling down on esports tournaments with record-breaking prize pools. The industry that had once whispered about his humiliation now spoke of him with awe and respect. Frank Vance's vision had become shorthand for innovation and strategic brilliance. Valor Gaming's stock had not only recovered, but soared to historic highs. His intercom buzzed. Mr. Vance, Jesse Rios, and Daphne Moore are here to see you. Send them in, Frank replied. The door opened, and his 2 most trusted allies entered. Jesse carried a bottle of 30-year-old scotch and 3 glasses. Daphne held a folder of documents. Celebrating something? Frank asked, rising to greet them. Jesse set the glasses down on Frank's desk and began pouring. You could say that. The Golden Dragon deal is finally dead. Victor's last hope, Daphne added, taking a seat. They officially withdrew their acquisition offer for his personal game studio venture. No one will touch him now. Frank accepted a glass from Jesse. And our friend Betty? Jesse's smile was cold. Victor's blacklisted. Betty's working retail at a mall kiosk selling phone cases. I heard she had to move to a studio apartment in Henderson because she couldn't afford Vegas rent anymore. She tried applying to 3 more gaming companies last month, Daphne added. All rejected her immediately. Your name carries weight in this industry, Frank. No one wants to cross you by hiring her. Frank nodded slowly, swirling the amber liquid in his glass. They made their choices. I have to admit, Daphne said, raising her glass. You played this brilliantly. 6 months ago, you were the cuckolded husband whose wife took his job. Now you're the king of the gaming world, and they're barely surviving. Jesse lifted his glass as well. To Frank Vance, the man who never forgives and never forgets. They drank, the expensive scotch burning pleasantly on the way down. Frank set his glass aside and moved to the window, looking out at his kingdom. This was never about forgiveness, he said quietly. It was about consequences, about justice. Call it what you want, Daphne replied. The end result is the same. You won. They lost. Completely. Frank's reflection in the glass showed no emotion, no gloating smile, no satisfied smirk. Just the calm, calculating expression of a man who had methodically executed his plans to perfection. The quarterly report looks excellent, Daphne continued, changing the subject as she opened her folder. Revenue up 23%. User acquisition exceeding projections. The board couldn't be happier. And the new Battle Royale game is testing off the charts, Jesse added. The dev team says we're on track for a holiday release. Frank turned back to them. Good. Schedule a press event for next month. I want to announce our 5-year roadmap personally. They spent the next hour discussing business strategies and upcoming projects. As the meeting concluded, Jesse and Daphne gathered their things to leave. They could see the door. Daphne paused. Frank, there's something I've been wondering. You never really answered me 6 months ago. About what? Whether you found what you were looking for. Whether this victory satisfied you. Frank considered the question. I protected what was mine. I ensured those who betrayed me paid a price. But are you happy? Daphne pressed. The question hung in the air. Frank looked back at the Las Vegas skyline, the empire he now commanded. Happiness wasn't the goal, he finally answered. Justice was. After they left, Frank remained at the window, watching the city below. His phone buzzed a text from an unknown number. He checked it reluctantly. It's Betty. Please talk to me. I'm desperate. I've lost everything. Just 5 minutes. Frank stared at the message, feeling nothing, no anger, no pity, no satisfaction. Just a cold certainty that justice had been served. He blocked the number and turned back to his work in the glass of the window. His reflection showed a man who had calculated every move, anticipated every countermove, and emerged victorious from a game most people never even realized was being played. He never forgave. He never forgot. And he won.